Everything's going to have to line up here pretty magically. Let's get into it with our panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us. I know this is who you want to hear from. And here they are now. Partner at Stone Court Capital, our Republican strategist in Rick Davis, who spent a career in the Senate. Jeannie Shanzano, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, certainly has thoughts here. Jeannie, I'm going to start with you on the jailbreak. Why did this happen now? We could have done this a month ago and had the same result. After all the Democrats who told us a promise of a vote was not enough, how did 8 come together to make this happen?
Yeah, Joe, and I was listening to you talk to Jack Fitzpatrick a few minutes ago, and you were saying there may be a name for these 8, and I've got one to throw your way. They're being called the folders. Yeah, the folders, Joe. I don't know if it's going to actually stick, but that's one I've heard. Wow. So I'm sure there are.
Is that how you feel as a Democrat? Did they fold or did they do the courageous thing?
You know, the reality is for shutdowns, they are never about policy. So I think that in their heart of hearts, most Democrats understood that the idea that they were going to get a change in terms of Obamacare subsidies during a shutdown was, wish casting, if you will. And so from that perspective, it is frustrating for sure for Democrats, but it is also realistic because this thing over 40 days has got to come to an end and policy change was not in the offing. That said, there is a big win here for Democrats, and I want to underscore that. It is always about framing, and the Democrats have framed that they are the party for the working, the average, the middle class. They are concerned about health care. They are concerned about cost. And this is while the president is, zooming around on Air Force One, flying close to Commander Stadium, on taxpayers' dimes, rebuilding, ballrooms, holding Gatsby parties. So it is about framing. And I think that will hold the Democrats in good stead as they look towards 26. But of course, they're not going to get that policy when they want. So who would have thought they would? You'd have to be crazy because we have a long history of shutdowns. They always end this way.
Well, coming off a big night on Tuesday, the whole narrative, Rick, last week was Democrats are winning. Donald Trump, who we see there at the football game yesterday, called Senate Republicans to the White House to say, you guys need to open the government. This is because of the shutdown and the fact that I was not on the ballot. Now we hear from Elizabeth Warren. Republicans in Congress extended tax breaks for billionaire corporations, but refused to extend tax credits to lower health costs for working people. The deal is a mistake, says Elizabeth Warren. Gavin Newsom, maybe the 28th presidential nominee. Tonight's Senate vote on the federal government shutdown should have been a time for strength. Instead, we saw capitulation and a betrayal of working Americans. Rick, why take this kind of flack when you were winning in elections across the country last week?
Yeah, memo to these Democratic leaders. If it's going to happen, be for it. This is a classic DC axiom. And the real part of it that I like is if it's going to happen, be for it early. And that's what these 8 Democrats figured out. Sooner or later, this is going to end. And we want to be the ones that put a spike to it because at the end of the day, yes, they had a great Tuesday last week. No doubt about it. Across the board. Really put a lot of vigor in their step, proved that the Democrats could win again, probably one of the single most important things. And yet at the same time, they could only press this, government shutdown so far. And with the, ACA subsidies spiking, the air traffic controllers leaving, the fears that the public have about, government shutdown, I'm shocked that only these 8 figured out the game, which is, let's change the topic, take the pressure off the American public, and start focusing on some of these policy issues that Jeannie was talking about, because that is where you have your strength. And regardless of whether you win or lose on them, the last thing you want to do is tell the American public, we're not going to open up government, basically like they've said they were going to do all along. When we have the wind at our back. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a political issue for Democrats running for the primary, but kudos to these 8. It's very much the similar crowd that voted with Republicans to kill the last long government shutdown in 2019. So, kudos to them for crossing the aisle. That's what they should have done.
No, God knows it helps when you're not running for re-election. We just got a statement, speaking of the pressure at the airport, Jeannie, from American Airlines CEO, COO rather. Our air traffic controllers deserve to be paid. We will never compromise on safety. And American Airlines is now making reductions for future dates, even with the light apparently at the end of the tunnel here. Combined operations saw about 1,400 cancellations and over 57,000 delay minutes, presumably since Friday when the capacity cuts began. Jeannie, President Trump on Truth Social's kind of lashing out at air traffic controllers. He's telling them they must get back to work now. Anyone who doesn't will be substantially docked, he writes. For those controllers who were great patriots, didn't take any time off, I will be recommending a bonus of $10,000 per person for distinguished service to our company, to our country. For those that did nothing but complain, he says, and took time off, even though everyone knew they would be paid in full, I am not happy with you. And says you will have a negative mark, at least in my mind, against your record. What's going on here, Jeannie? Does the president have the power to do that?
It is a classic misreading of the room on Donald Trump's part, and something he's been doing right along this last month, in my estimation. There is no evidence of or world in which you had air traffic controllers staying home because they were protesting politically. You had people staying home because they have rent to pay, they have food to put on their table, they have children to take to doctors, and they too need a modicum of the money that Donald Trump has in which to run their lives, and they were not getting paid. So there is no evidence that people were staying home because they were patriotic, they were unpatriotic, or they were in bed with the Democrats. This is about living. This is about paying their bills. This is about winter coming and having to pay for heat and electricity. And so for him to come out and say this is stunning. And there's so much about this that is just mind-boggling, including the fact if you were going to give $10,000 bonuses, why didn't you say this when the shutdown started so that these people stayed in the role? And so there were no shutdowns or slowdowns at the airport. So Joe, I've got a lot on this.
Yeah. That was pretty good. You know, and maybe next shutdown he will. $10,000. I don't know where he's going to get that. Rick, did Donald Trump think he was invoking Ronald Reagan in 1981? How does he think this is going to play?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think this is pretty simple. Technically, in addition to the Democrats caving, the Republicans caved, right? They originally weren't going to give these kinds of benefits to furloughed workers and things like that the Democrats got successfully in this CR, assuming it actually gets to Trump's desk. And so he's got to complain about something. And the way I read this is I wouldn't have agreed to this deal if you guys hadn't struck and shut down the, national air traffic system, which is basically Duffy's argument, is that, we've had to cut back 20% of these flights by Thanksgiving because you guys aren't showing up for your jobs. So it's just casting blame. I think there's much more to it. And who knows if any of this stuff's ever going to come to fruition. But I take it as on its surface. It's like Donald Trump had to blame someone for agreeing to a deal that he otherwise didn't agree to a week ago.
Boy, for those of you who did nothing but complain. Jeannie, we've got less than a minute. Is this government reopened by the end of the week?
Gosh, I hope so. And I have to disagree with Rick on Sean Duffy. I was a real world fan, and Sean Duffy was much more, he was much more sympathetic and empathetic to those traffic controllers than Donald Trump, than his boss. So, right. But yeah, hopefully we're open at least by Wednesday or Thursday.
You mentioned Donald Trump's big night at the game. Were you at the Commanders game, Rick? Or no?
No, I was not.
All right. Just the smartest guy in the room. You know who was? Producer James was there. He saw that flyby, shaking the rafters. Air Force One, it was like the lowest flyby in the history of sporting events, with the president, of course, on board. And I mentioned all of this. Rick and Jeannie will be back in our second hour here, of course, on Balance of Power. Thank you both. I mentioned all of this with news. Just hitting the terminal here. Brian Dable is out as the Giants head coach. Maybe we need to fly over Giants Stadium. We'll talk more about that straight ahead. I suspect Alexis will have more on that coming up as well. In our second hour, we're also going to be joined by a member of the House who's about to be faced with this deal. Greg Stanton, Democrat.